welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
We are so thrilled you decided to spend your time with us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right off the bat, before we even get into the weeds here, I want to invite you to share this audio with a friend, someone who might need to hear it, and definitely hit that subscribe button so you never miss our future deep dives.
For sure.
Because today, we are tackling an incredibly foundational topic, something that really sits at the very bedrock of how we understand everything else. We are asking the question, what is a covenant in the Bible, dead works, or living faith?
It's the perfect place to start. And if you are joining us as a newcomer to the Bible, or if you've recently started your walk of faith and feel a bit, I don't know, overwhelmed by the sheer size of the biblical narrative.
Because it's huge.
It really is. It's massive.
Yeah.
But we want you to know that this specific deep dive is built entirely with you in mind. We're keeping the pace gentle. We are not going to rush through these massive historical concepts. We're going to take the time to break down these ancient ideas using really simple, clear language. Because we really want to thoroughly unpack the question, what is a covenant in the Bible, dead works, or living faith? And do it within a framework that actually makes sense of the entire biblical story within our first hour here.
Right. And that brings us to our mission for today. Our goal is to explore and explain biblical covenants in absolute detail.
Yeah.
We're drawing from a stack of incredible source materials, theological frameworks, and the biblical texts themselves. And we're going to impartially report on all of it.
Exactly. Just laying out the facts.
Right. So we're going to start with the foundational question of why God chooses to relate to humanity this way in the first place. And then we'll progress step by step through the grand narrative, from the beginning of creation all the way to what it means for your life tomorrow morning.
Which is the most important part.
It really is. So let's look at this big question. Why a covenant?
Yeah, why do it this way?
Right, because when you step back and look at the absolute power of a creator, God didn't have to choose this specific method of interaction.
No, not at all.
He could have just been like a potter with clay.
Yeah.
Just shaping humanity, using us for some utilitarian purpose, and then tossing us aside without any real relational attachment.
Right. Or consider the analogy of a master with a slave.
Oh, yeah.
A master simply dictates terms from a position of absolute authority. You know, he issues commands from the sky, demands strict obedience, and the relationship extends no further than productivity.
Just getting the work done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The master doesn't seek the heart of the slave. He only seeks the labor.
There's also that classic philosophical idea of the distant deistic watchmaker.
Oh, the watchmaker, yeah.
Right, where the watchmaker meticulously crafts the intricate gears of the universe, winds up the clock, sets it on the mantle, and then completely steps back to just watch it tick from afar.
No intervention.
None. No personal connection, just cold mechanical observation. But our source material makes it abundantly clear that the God of the Bible doesn't fit any of those molds.
No.
It chose a covenant. And that choice reveals something profound about his character.
It does, because to ask why God uses covenants is actually to ask about his fundamental nature. God is not some abstract cosmic force or an isolated, lonely monarch sitting in the dark somewhere. The Christian understanding is that God exists in an eternal covenant of love within the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Right.
So before the universe was ever spoken into existence, there was already this perfect, joyful, eternal fellowship of love happening within the nature of God himself.
That's a huge paradigm shift.
It changes everything. Because his very essence is rooted in this eternal relationship, the way he interacts with his creation is naturally going to reflect that. He desires a personal relationship with us, not an impersonal transaction. When God initiates a covenant, he's making a definitive statement. He's saying, I am not content to merely be your creator from a million miles away. I am choosing to bind myself to you in a bond of love.
I love that. And the sources provide this incredibly moving illustration that captures the heart of this. So for you listening, imagine a great, immensely wealthy king who's riding through the poorest section of his capital city.
Okay.
And he sees an orphan, just a street urchin with absolutely nothing to his name. Now, a transaction, a mere contract, would be the king ordering his carriage to stop, handing that child a heavy bag of gold coins and saying, here, this will feed you. Good luck out there.
Which is nice.
It is. It's an act of charity. It's helpful, but completely avoids a relationship. The king goes back to his palace, and the orphan stays on the street.
Right, but a covenant is an entirely different reality.
Exactly.
In a covenant, the king doesn't just hand over a bag of gold. He stops the carriage, steps out into the dirt, and brings that child into his own royal carriage. He takes the orphan back to the palace, legally adopts him, gives the child his own royal name.
His own name?
His own name, pulls up a chair for him at the family dining table, and makes him a full legal co-heir with his own natural-born son.
That is incredible.
The king binds his own reputation and future to that child. It's about establishing a permanent familial bond.
And that distinction between a contract and a covenant is so vital for newcomers to grasp. Because our modern world runs almost entirely on contracts.
It really does.
Let's look at a horse trader analogy to make this crystal clear. Say you go to the market to buy a horse.
Okay.
You and the trader draw up a contract. You hand over 100 gold coins, and he hands over the reins to the horse. That entire interaction is a transaction based entirely on mutual self-interest.
Right.
You want the horse for your farm. He wants the gold for his pocket. It's about a thing.
Yeah.
And the moment those reins switch hands, the bond expires. Done. If the horse goes lame the very next day, or if you lose the gold on your way home, the trader doesn't care. The contract is over. He has no further obligation to you.
But a covenant operates on a completely different frequency. The most universally understood illustration of a covenant today is marriage vows.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Right. When a couple stands at the altar, they aren't exchanging goods or services. They are exchanging themselves.
Yeah.
They don't sign a document that says, I will provide housing as long as you cook the meals. They say, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health.
Mm-hmm.
A covenant is about a union and a person. It's based on self-giving love, not mutual self-interest. It's designed to be a lifetime bond.
And unlike a contract, which is dissolved simply by a failure to perform a specific task or deliver a product.
Right. A covenant is broken by a betrayal of the relationship itself.
So for you, the listener, as you navigate these ancient texts, the core takeaway to keep in the front of your mind is this. A contract says, I will be your master as long as you are useful to me.
Conditional.
Highly conditional and performance-based. But God's covenant says, I will be your God even when you are faithless, because I have bound myself to you.
Wow.
It's a bond of the heart, a permanent uniting of his promise to our desperate need.
And this foundational understanding allows us to step back into the ancient world to see how God historically communicated this reality. To fully appreciate the weight of God's covenants in the Bible, we need to understand the cultural language he was using.
Right. Context is everything.
Exactly. In the ancient Near East, thousands of years ago, there was a specific, well-known political framework called a suzerain-vassal treaty.
Suzerain-vassal.
Yes. A suzerain was a great, powerful emperor or king, and a vassal was a lesser, weaker king or a conquered nation.
Okay.
And God takes this exact, familiar cultural framework, something the ancient Israelites would have understood intuitively, and he fills it with his own redemptive purposes.
It's fascinating how God meets people right where they are, using the political and legal concepts of their specific time period to explain cosmic, eternal truths.
Yeah, he speaks their language.
So the historical sources break down the anatomy of these ancient treaties into 6 common elements. First is the preamble.
Right.
This is where the great king introduces himself and establishes his authority. In the biblical texts, you constantly see God starting his covenants with a clear declaration, I am the Lord your God.
He's establishing who is initiating the bond.
Exactly. Then following the preamble is the historical prologue.
And this part is crucial. In a purely secular ancient treaty, the emperor would list all the times he had protected the lesser king, reminding him of his debts.
Kind of holding it over his head.
Exactly. But God uses this to establish a foundation of pure grace. Before he ever issues a single rule or command, he reminds the people of what he's already done to save them.
Oh, I see.
He says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery.
Wow.
The relationship is rooted in God's prior action of salvation, not a negotiation of future performance.
That order of operations changes everything. It means the relationship starts with a rescue, not a resume.
Beautifully said.
So then we get to the third element, the stipulations. These are the rules of the relationship. But in the context of grace we just established, these rules, like the 10 Commandments, aren't a ladder that people have to climb to earn God's favor.
Right.
They are the terms for how to live safely and fruitfully within the favor they already have.
Yes.
It's the king saying, now that you live in my palace, Here is how we treat each other in this house.
Which leads right into the fourth element, which brings in the gravity of the treaty, the sanctions. These outline the specific blessings that will naturally flow from obedience and fidelity, as well as the severe curses or consequences that will result from disobedience and rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
Fifth, there are witnesses called to observe the treaty. In ancient earthly treaties, kings would call upon their local deities. But in the Bible, you often see God calling upon the cosmos itself, heaven and earth, to act as witnesses.
Showing that this is a matter of cosmic significance.
Mm.
And then we reach the sixth element, which is the ratification ceremony.
Yeah.
And this wasn't just, signing a piece of paper with a quill.
Oh, no.
It was a solemn, bloody, unforgettable ritual that sealed the deal. And this brings us to one of the most stunning, visually arresting scenes in the entire Bible, Genesis chapter 15.
It's wild.
It is. God is making a covenant with Abraham using this exact ancient ritual, but he introduces a twist that would have left an ancient audience completely speechless.
Right, because the standard procedure for ratifying a suzerain vassal treaty involved taking several animals, heifers, goats, rams, cutting them perfectly in half, and laying the bloody halves on the ground with the pathway between them.
That is intense.
It was very intense. Both the great king and the lesser king would walk together through that corridor of blood. It was a self-maledictory oath.
Meaning they were calling a curse down on themselves.
Exactly. By walking through the pieces, they were publicly swearing, "May what has happened to these animals happen to me if I break my end of this covenant. May I be torn apart."
It is intensely graphic, but it really underscores the absolute seriousness of the bond. So Abraham prepares the animals, he cuts them in half, he lays them out. And he waits all day, fighting off the birds of prey, waiting for God to show up so they can walk the path together.
Yeah.
But as the sun goes down, a terrifying, thick darkness descends. Abraham falls into a deep, supernatural sleep. He is completely incapacitated. And then, in the pitch black, God appears alone, manifesting as a smoking firepot and a flaming torch. And God alone passes between the divided, bloody pieces, while Abraham is just asleep on the ground.
When you understand the cultural context, the theological weight of that moment is staggering.
It really is.
By walking through those pieces entirely alone while a human partner sleeps, God is taking the curse of the covenant, the penalty for breaking it, entirely upon himself.
Wow.
He is saying to Abraham, "I will be perfectly faithful to my promises in this covenant. But even more than that, when you inevitably fail, when you and your descendants break this bond, I will bear the curse for its breaking. I will be the one torn apart."
The creator of the universe is swearing by himself to absorb the penalty of human rebellion.
It's just unbelievable grace.
And it fundamentally changes how we view the consequences of breaking a covenant. We really have to look at what those consequences actually are. Because if God's covenant is a bond of life, if it is the very source of existence and flourishing, then breaking it isn't just a minor infraction.
No.
It's not like getting a speeding ticket where you pay a small fine, attend a class, and go about your day. Breaking a covenant with the source of life is a matter of spiritual death. It is the unraveling of existence itself.
And we see the catastrophic reality of this unraveling right at the beginning in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
God made a covenant with humanity, placing Adam and Eve in a perfect world characterized by unhindered fellowship. The environment was flawless, the provision was absolute, and God gave one single stipulation.
Right. Do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Exactly. Now, often modern readers view this as God being arbitrary, or acting like a tyrant, testing his subjects for his own amusement. But within a covenant framework, that rule was a boundary of love.
Think of a parent walking near a cliff with a toddler. The parent says, "Do not step beyond this rock."
Right.
The parent isn't trying to ruin the child's fun or restrict their freedom out of spite. The parent is trying to keep the child from plummeting to their death. The boundary is there to preserve life.
Exactly. So when Adam and Eve listened to the serpent and chose to take that fruit, they weren't just committing a minor dietary infraction. It was an act of cosmic treason.
Cosmic treason.
Yes. They looked at their loving creator, the one who had provided every other tree in the garden, and essentially said, "We don't trust you. We believe you are holding out on us. We want to be our own gods, determining good and evil for ourselves."
Wow.
They unilaterally severed the covenant bond, and the resulting unraveling of human flourishing was immediate and devastating. The sources outlined 4 massive alienations that fractured the human experience from that moment on.
Let's explore those. Because the deep psychological and physical reality of those four alienations perfectly diagnoses the pain and dysfunction we see in our world today.
They really do.
First, there was an immediate alienation from self. Before the rebellion, Adam and Eve were naked and felt no shame. They were perfectly comfortable in their own skin.
Right.
But the moment the covenant was broken, shame entered the human experience. They suddenly felt exposed, inadequate, and desperately tried to sew fig leaves together to hide themselves. The human psyche was fractured.
Second, there was a profound alienation from each other. The perfect, harmonious union of the first marriage was instantly shattered by self-preservation and blame.
Yeah, the blame game starts immediately.
Immediately. When God asks Adam what happened, Adam doesn't take responsibility as the federal head of his family. He points the finger at Eve and even subtly blames God, saying, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit."
Passing the buck.
Exactly. The intimacy they once shared was replaced by defensive walls, suspicion, and relational discord.
And third, there was an alienation from creation itself. The physical world was subjected to futility. The ground was cursed. Work, which was originally given as a joyful creative partnership with God, became grueling toil.
Sweat and pain.
Yeah. The earth would now produce thorns and thistles. Survival would require intense labor. The harmonious balance of nature was thrown into chaos.
And finally, the fourth and most devastating consequence: alienation from God.
The biggest one.
By far. They were physically and spiritually exiled from the garden, barred from the special, intimate presence of God. A flaming sword was placed at the entrance to ensure they could not return in their fallen state and eat from the tree of life, trapping themselves in eternal brokenness.
So this fourfold alienation is the ultimate consequence of covenant breaking. It brings spiritual death, relational isolation, and physical decay into a world that was meticulously designed for life and union.
And the biblical narrative doesn't just leave this as an abstract concept from the dawn of time. It gives us vivid, historical accounts of what covenant unfaithfulness looks like as human history progresses.
Yeah, like the tragic story of King Saul in 1 Samuel chapter 15.
That is a tough one.
It is. God had made a covenant to be Israel's true ultimate king, and Saul was the human king appointed to serve under him as a vassal. God gave Saul a very clear, specific command regarding the Amalekites, a nation that had viciously attacked Israel.
Right.
As an act of divine judgment, Saul was ordered to utterly destroy them and everything that belonged to them.
But Saul decides to edit the covenant stipulations.
He sure does.
He wins the military victory, but he surveys the spoils and decides to keep the best of the sheep, the fattest calves, and the oxen for himself. He even spares the enemy king, Agag. Saul thought he knew better than the suzerain.
He treated the absolute command of God as a mere suggestion that could be modified for personal gain.
Exactly. And the confrontation that follows is chilling. The prophet Samuel arrives, and he can hear the sheep bleating and the oxen lowing in the background.
Caught red-handed.
Yeah. Saul runs out and tries to play the pious religious leader, claiming he saved the best animals to offer as a grand sacrifice to God.
But Samuel sees right through the religious veneer. Samuel delivers this stinging rebuke that cuts to the core of what a covenant requires. He says, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams."
Saul was trying to operate under a contract mentality. He believed he could violate the terms of the relationship, pursue his own self-interest, and then essentially pay God off with a religious bribe at the end.
Wow.
He thought a few dead sheep would compensate for a rebellious heart. But God views covenant unfaithfulness as the sin of divination and arrogance. Because of this betrayal, the kingdom was torn from Saul.
And his life just falls apart.
Completely. His reign spiraled into intense paranoia, jealousy, and eventual madness, culminating in his tragic death. It is a stark warning that you cannot renegotiate the terms of a covenant with the Creator.
We see an equally sobering example of this in the story of Achan in Joshua chapter 7. The Israelites have just crossed into the Promised Land. They've experienced this massive, miraculous victory at the heavily fortified city of Jericho, where the walls literally fell down flat.
Incredible moment.
But before the battle, God gave a strict covenant command. This city is devoted to destruction. All the silver, gold, bronze, and iron are holy to the Lord and must go into the treasury. No individual is allowed to take any plunder for personal enrichment.
But amidst the chaos of the victory, a man named Achan sees a beautiful, expensive cloak from Shinar, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold.
The temptation is just too great.
It is. He takes them, smuggles them into his tent, and buries them in the dirt. It was a secret, private sin. He likely rationalized it, thinking that out of an entire destroyed city, these few items wouldn't be missed.
But the consequences of Achan's private covenant breaking were horrifically public. A few days later, Israel sends a small detachment of soldiers to attack a tiny, seemingly insignificant city called Ai.
Right, they expect an easy victory.
But instead, they are completely routed. The men of Ai chase them down and strike dead 36 Israelite soldiers. The entire nation is paralyzed with fear. Joshua falls on his face before God, absolutely devastated, asking why God has abandoned them.
And God's response highlights the interconnected reality of the covenant community. God tells Joshua, Israel has sinned, they have transgressed my covenant.
Notice the plural there, they.
Exactly. One man stole the items, but the entire nation was held accountable. This is a crucial concept for newcomers to grasp. In the biblical worldview, a covenant isn't just a private arrangement between an individual and God. It binds the community together.
Covenant breaking is a moral poison.
Yes. Achan's hidden theft introduced a deadly infection into the camp that jeopardized the presence of a holy God among his people. The presence of God withdrew, and without that presence, Israel was utterly powerless against even the smallest enemy.
When you look at humanity exiled from Eden, Saul losing his mind and his kingdom, and Achan bringing defeat and death to his nation, it paints a seemingly hopeless picture.
It really does.
I mean, if the consequence of breaking the covenant is spiritual death, unraveling, and alienation, and if human beings continually prove themselves incapable of maintaining their end of the bond, how can the story possibly end well?
Right.
This is where the entire narrative pivots toward an ultimate remedy.
Because all of these catastrophic failures point directly and unavoidably to the cross. They reveal the sheer magnitude of the problem that only God himself could solve. Humanity's persistent covenant breaking demanded a severe, deadly consequence.
The justice of a holy God cannot simply sweep treason under the rug.
No, it can't. But on the cross, Jesus Christ steps into history to become the covenant breaker in our place.
Wow.
He is the flawless Son of God, perfectly innocent, perfectly obedient, yet he willingly subjects himself to the catastrophic consequences of our betrayal.
The parallels there are profound. Jesus was the true king who was rejected and stripped of his earthly dignity, absorbing the judgment that a rebellious king like Saul deserved. He was treated as the ultimate sinner, exposed outside the city walls and judged, absorbing the wrath that a thief like Achan deserved, so that we, the guilty covenant community, could be spared the sword.
And when Jesus hangs on the cross and the sky turns black, he cries out in agony, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
Such a heavy moment.
In that moment, he is experiencing the ultimate terrifying reality of the covenant curse. He is experiencing the profound alienation from God that Adam and Eve inaugurated in Eden. He is plunged into the spiritual death, the isolation, and the unmitigated darkness of exile.
The eternal, unbroken bond of love within the Trinity was stretched and strained in his human experience of God's holy wrath against sin.
Exactly. He absorbed the poison of our rebellion into his own body so that the bond between God and humanity could be permanently, eternally restored.
Understanding that ultimate climax is incredible. But to fully appreciate the depth of it, we need to look at how God revealed this massive rescue plan over thousands of years.
Right, it didn't just happen overnight.
No. God didn't just drop the complete theology of the cross on humanity all at once. He didn't hand Adam and Eve a systematic theology textbook.
That would have been confusing.
Very. He unfolded his redemptive plan progressively, revealing it chapter by chapter, like an unfolding epic story. Exploring these successive chapters is essential for anyone new to the Bible to see how the diverse books and eras all connect into one cohesive narrative.
Let's trace these major chapters, showing how God builds upon his promises in each era. We've already examined the foundational chapter, the Adamic Covenant, which theologians often refer to as the covenant of works.
Okay.
The setting was pristine, a perfect world, an untainted human nature, and unhindered fellowship with the Creator. The stipulation was straightforward. Do this and live. Disobey and die. It demanded perfect personal obedience.
But when Adam failed that test, it introduced a vital theological mechanism known as federal headship.
Federal headship.
Yeah. And while that sounds like a dry legal term, it's actually a concept we understand intuitively. Think about international politics. If a king or a president signs a formal declaration of war against another nation, the entire country goes to war.
Right.
The citizens of that country don't get to opt out by saying, well, I was at home eating dinner. I didn't personally sign the parchment, so I'm not at war.
No, it doesn't work like that.
The leader acts as the public representative.
Hmm.
His actions legally bind the entire nation.
And Adam served as the first public representative, the federal head of all humanity. He stood in the garden representing the entire human race. When he rebelled and shattered the covenant, he plunged all of us into the resulting conflict.
We fell with him.
We fell with him. We inherited not only the legal guilt of his treason, but also his corrupted, fallen nature. We are born into the world already possessing a heart bent away from God.
Mm-hmm.
However, the beauty of this concept of representation is that it establishes the exact framework God will use to save us. It sets the stage for the arrival of what the Apostle Paul calls the last Adam, Jesus Christ.
And where the first Adam was tested in a lush, perfect garden with every need met and failed spectacularly.
Yeah.
The last Adam, Jesus, was tested in a brutal, barren wilderness. Starving after 40 days of fasting, surrounded by wild animals, and directly assaulted by the temptations of the devil.
The complete opposite environment.
Yet, in the harshest possible conditions, Jesus held the line. He succeeded where Adam failed. He perfectly obeyed the covenant of works on our behalf. He is our new, victorious representative, winning the righteousness that we could never achieve.
Following the disaster of the fall, human history spiraled into unimaginable violence and corruption, leading to the global judgment of the flood. Emerging from that devastation, God establishes the Noahic covenant.
Noah and the ark.
Yes, this is a covenant of preservation. God makes a unilateral promise to Noah and through him to all living creatures that he will never again destroy the earth with a flood. He guarantees the stability of the natural order, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter. And he hangs a magnificent universal sign in the sky to seal this promise, the rainbow. It serves as a permanent, visible guarantee that God's overarching plan of redemption will have a stable stage upon which to unfold.
With the stage secured, the narrative leaps forward to a man named Abram, later called Abraham. The Abrahamic covenant is a monumental turning point where God's rescue mission narrows its focus to a specific family line.
God makes a sweeping threefold promise to Abraham. First, he promises land, a specific geographical territory for his people to dwell in.
Right.
Second, he promises a seed, a multitude of descendants that will eventually become a great nation, culminating in one specific descendant who will change history.
Wow.
And third, he promises universal blessing, that through Abraham's family line, all the families of the earth will ultimately be blessed.
And what is absolutely critical for newcomers to recognize here is the basis of this covenant. It is entirely rooted in God's sovereign grace. Abraham wasn't chosen because he was uniquely righteous or morally superior.
No.
The text explicitly says that Abraham simply believed the promise of God, and God credited that faith to him as righteousness. This gracious covenant was visibly sealed with the sign of circumcision, marking Abraham's family as set apart for God's purposes.
Fast forward a few centuries, and Abraham's descendants have multiplied into a massive nation, but they are enslaved in Egypt.
Right.
God miraculously rescues them, parting the Red Sea, and brings them to the foot of a terrifying smoke-covered mountain. This is Sinai, the birthplace of the Mosaic Covenant. This is where Moses receives the law, famously encapsulated in the Ten Commandments, along with hundreds of detailed civil and ceremonial regulations.
And this is perhaps the most misunderstood chapter in the entire biblical story. When people new to the Bible read the book of Leviticus or Exodus, it is incredibly easy to assume that God is introducing a new system of salvation by works.
Oh.
It looks like God is saying, if you follow these 613 rules perfectly, then I will save you and take you to heaven.
But that completely ignores the suzerain and vassal structure we discussed earlier. Remember the historical prologue.
Right.
God had already saved them from the crushing whip of Egyptian slavery by his sheer grace. The blood of the Passover lamb had already rescued them. The law was not given to save them. It was given to instruct a freed people on how to live out their new identity as a wholly distinct nation in the midst of pagan cultures.
It's crucial to understand that the law was never a ladder to heaven. But because the Israelites still possessed that fallen Adamic nature, they were utterly incapable of keeping the law.
No one could.
So the law served a secondary, deeply painful purpose. The Apostle Paul describes the law as a tutor or a strict disciplinarian. It functioned like a spiritual MRI.
An MRI.
Yeah, think about it. An MRI is a brilliant machine. It can scan your body and clearly reveal that you have a shattered femur. But the MRI machine itself possesses zero capacity to heal the bone.
That's a great way to put it.
The law of Moses brilliantly exposed the deep fractures of human sin, highlighting exactly how our humanity fell short of God's holiness, thereby proving to them that they desperately needed a savior who could actually fix the break.
Recognizing their inability to govern themselves righteously, the people eventually demand a king. And this leads to the Davidic covenant.
King David.
Yes. God takes the broad promise of a seed that he originally made to Abraham and narrows the focus even further down to one specific royal dynasty. God makes a breathtaking promise to King David. An eternal king will emerge from his lineage.
An eternal king.
Yes, this future descendant will not just rule for a few decades and die. He will establish a kingdom of perfect justice, righteousness, and peace that will endure forever.
When you step back and survey all of these massive historical chapters, Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, David, you start to see a singular, brilliant narrative thread weaving through all the chaos of human history.
You really do.
Theologians call this the covenant of grace. It is God's unified, relentless plan A to restore the brokenness of Eden. He preserves the world through Noah, promises a saving family through Abraham, exposes the depth of sin through Moses, and prepares the throne through David.
Yet, despite all these incredible promises, a fatal flaw remained within the human condition.
Yeah.
As you read through the later historical books and the prophets, you see a tragic, repetitive cycle. The Israelites promise to obey, they rebel, they face judgment, they cry out for mercy, God rescues them, and then they rebel again.
Over and over.
Over and over. The prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel act as divine physicians, diagnosing the root cause of this relentless cycle. The people possess a heart of stone.
A heart of stone.
Yes, the Mosaic Law was glorious, but it was written on external tablets of stone. It could tell the people what to do, but it could not supply the internal power or desire to actually do it. A heart of stone is dead. It cannot beat with love for God.
Because the old system was fundamentally incapable of fixing the human heart, God declares that he is going to do something radically new. Through the prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel, God announces the coming of the new covenant.
This isn't just a minor update to the old system.
No, it is a total structural overhaul of human nature. God outlines 3 staggering new promises that finally and permanently solve the crisis of the heart. Let's explore these in clear, simple terms for everyone listening.
The first promise is internal transformation. God declares, I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts. He promises to remove the dead heart of stone and replace it with a living heart of flesh, placing his own spirit within his people.
That is massive.
It means the motivation changes entirely. Under the old system, obedience was driven by external pressure and the terror of punishment. Under the new covenant, God changes our fundamental desires. He gives us a new nature that organically wants to love him and obey him from the inside out.
The second promise is a personal relationship. God says, I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall each one teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. Under the old covenant, intimacy with God felt highly restricted. The average Israelite farmer couldn't just stroll into the presence of God. You had to go through an entire hierarchy of priests, Levites, and complex rituals.
Very complex.
The new covenant obliterates those barriers, promising direct, intimate, personal knowledge of the Creator for every single believer, regardless of their status.
The third, and arguably the most comforting promise, is complete forgiveness.
Yes.
God declares, For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. This is a revolutionary concept. Under the Old Covenant sacrificial system, sins were temporarily covered, but the blood of bulls and goats could never truly take away guilt.
There was a constant annual reminder of sin.
But the New Covenant promises a definitive judicial cleansing. When God says he will remember our sins no more, it isn't an issue of divine amnesia. It is a legal declaration that the debt has been permanently canceled. The record is wiped clean.
And the most glorious reality of the entire Bible is how these 3 impossible promises become our actual reality. They are all fulfilled in the person and work of Jesus Christ.
Fully fulfilled.
We can celebrate this because Jesus steps into history and perfectly assumes every single role we have discussed. He is the true ultimate seed of Abraham who brings the blessing of salvation to the entire world. He is the faithful, obedient Israelite who flawlessly kept every stipulation of the law of Moses when the rest of humanity failed. He is the eternal Son of David who conquered death and now sits on the throne of the universe forever.
And most crucially, he is the ultimate mediator who inaugurates this new covenant. He doesn't ratify it with the blood of animals. On the night before his crucifixion, he lifts a cup of wine and says, "This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." Every shadow, every symbol, every ancient promise God ever made across thousands of years of history finds its absolute, definitive yes in the finished work of Jesus Christ.
Exploring this soaring, sweeping theology is breathtaking. But we want to ensure this doesn't just remain an academic exercise in your mind. The power of this knowledge is unleashed when it is understood and applied to your daily experience.
Yes, practical application.
We need to bring this massive theology down to earth. What does the shift from the Old Covenant to the New Covenant actually feel like in real life? To make this deeply practical and tangible for you, the listener, we're going to walk through a day in the life of two illustrative characters. Caleb, a devout man living under the Old Covenant, and Simeon, a believer living under the reality of the New Covenant.
Let's step into Caleb's world first. Imagine Caleb waking up in a small stone house in ancient Judea. Before his eyes even fully open, before his feet touch the dirt floor, a suffocating, heavy burden settles onto his chest. He begins his day with the exact same terrifying question that haunts him every morning. Am I right with God today?
Man, that anxiety is the lens through which he views every single interaction. His life requires an exhausting, relentless vigilance. When he sits down for his morning meal, he can't just enjoy the food. He has to meticulously analyze it, right? He must ensure that not a single crumb violates the complex dietary laws. He must wash his hands in a very specific, ritualistic manner. Later in the morning, while working in his field, his teenage son disobeys him, and Caleb loses his temper, shouting in anger. He doesn't just feel the normal sting of parental regret. A cold dread washes over him. He feels legally condemned. He knows he has violated the holiness of God.
To try and manage the spiritual crisis, Caleb pauses his work to pray. He takes out his phylacteries, small leather boxes containing tiny scrolls of scripture, and meticulously binds them with leather straps to his arm and his forehead, literally tying the law to his body.
Literally.
But even as he recites the prayers, he is acutely aware of the massive physical and spiritual chasm separating him from God. He knows that the localized holy presence of God is housed miles away in the temple in Jerusalem. And even if he walked to Jerusalem, he couldn't get near it. God's presence is sealed behind a massive, thick, woven veil. Caleb is entirely dependent on Levi, a family friend who happens to be a priest, to act as a go-between. Caleb is essentially a spectator, standing on the outside of his own religion, hoping the priests do their job correctly.
And then comes the grueling sensory reality of the guilt cycle. A few days later, Caleb realizes he made an honest accounting error in his business and accidentally underpaid a merchant. The law is clear. His sin has incurred a debt, and without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness.
So he has to go.
He must leave his farm, travel to Jerusalem, and purchase an unblemished animal. He stands in the crowded, noisy, smell-filled courtyard of the temple. He has to place his hand on the head of an innocent, trembling lamb, symbolically transferring his guilt. Then he watches as the priest slits the animal's throat. He sees the hot blood pour out. He smells the burning flesh on the altar.
It is a gruesome, visceral, terrifying reminder that his personal sin costs a life. He walks away from the temple knowing that his specific sin has been covered for that moment. But the relief is agonizingly temporary.
So temporary.
As he makes the long walk back to his farm, he knows with absolute certainty that he is going to mess up again. He will lose his temper, he will harbor a jealous thought, he will make another mistake. The cycle is never ending. He will be right back at the temple buying another lamb.
He lies down to sleep that night, completely uncertain if his sacrifices were enough, if his repentance was sincere enough, or if he is truly accepted by a holy God. He is trapped in a covenant of works, and it is crushing him.
Now let's turn the page and contrast Caleb's exhausting existence with Simeon, our believer who is living under the brilliant light of the new covenant. Simeon wakes up in the exact same geographical part of the world, perhaps even in a similar stone house, but his internal reality has been completely revolutionized. He does not wake up asking, "Am I right with God?" He opens his eyes knowing with absolute certainty that he is right with God. Not because of his own flawless behavior yesterday, but entirely because of what Jesus accomplished on the cross.
This represents a monumental paradigm shift in human psychology. Simeon does not wake up to begin the grueling work of earning his acceptance. He wakes up and lives his day working from a place of guaranteed, unshakable acceptance.
Right.
Let's imagine Simeon also struggles with his temper and spoke harshly to his wife the night before. When he wakes up, he doesn't spiral into legal panic. He doesn't calculate how many animals he needs to buy. He feels genuine sorrow, yes, but it is the sorrow of a son who has offended a loving father, not the terror of a criminal facing a judge.
The motivation changes.
He turns to his wife, confesses his fault directly and asks for her forgiveness, and internally he speaks directly to his heavenly Father. He acknowledges his sin, knowing full well that the penalty for that specific moment of anger was already paid in full by the blood of Jesus 2,000 years ago.
Pay close attention to the profound intimacy of Simeon's access to God. Later that afternoon, Simeon is walking by a well outside of town. He wants to pray. He doesn't need to plan a pilgrimage to a temple.
Nope.
He doesn't need to track down Levi the priest to mediate for him. He doesn't have to fear a thick veil blocking his way. The veil was torn in two when Jesus died. Simeon has bold, unrestricted access to speak directly to the creator of the universe right there in the dust by the well. He talks to God as a beloved child, talks to a perfect, attentive father.
And what happens when Simeon makes that same business mistake that Caleb made? When Simeon realizes he accidentally underpaid a merchant, he doesn't scramble to make restitution out of a paralyzing fear of losing his salvation or facing divine retribution.
No, he doesn't have to.
He runs to make it right out of a transformed heart of love. He desires to reflect the justice and generosity of the God who saved him. He gives the merchant what he owes and perhaps adds extra because the law of love is now written on his heart. When Simeon lies down to sleep that night, he is perfectly secure. He rests not on his own flimsy, inconsistent track record, but on the unbreakable, perfect track record of Jesus Christ imputed to him.
Connecting Simeon's reality to you, the listener, right now in the 21st century, the implications are absolutely life-altering. Let's look at what this new covenant reality means for your life tomorrow morning.
Okay.
First and foremost, it grants you an unshakable identity. We live in a hypercritical world that is obsessed with defining you by your labels, your job title, your political affiliation, your net worth, your relationship status, or the worst mistakes of your past.
Oh, definitely.
The new covenant strips all of that away and declares that your primary eternal identity is a completely forgiven, fiercely loved child of God. That identity transcends and outlasts every worldly label society tries to pin on you.
Second, it means you have been given profound freedom. We are entirely off the exhausting modern performance treadmill. The cultural narrative constantly demands that you hustle, achieve, and prove your worth every single day. If you fail, you are cast aside.
It's exhausting.
Even many religious environments subtly operate this way, suggesting God only loves you when you are performing well. The new covenant shatters that lie. It says the work of justifying your existence is already finished. You are accepted by God based on Christ's flawless resume, not your own deeply flawed one.
Third, it anchors your life in absolute assurance. We are living in an age characterized by massive anxiety, shifting cultural sands, and constant uncertainty. When your health deteriorates, when the economy crashes, when you face unexpected tragedy, or when human relationships betray you, you possess an eternal, unbreakable bond with God that absolutely nothing can sever. You are held by a covenant promise that depends on God's faithfulness, not your own fluctuating strength.
To really cement this in your mind, consider the difference between a stressed-out tenant farmer and a beloved son. Under the old way of thinking, you live like a tenant farmer. You are frantically working the land from dawn till dusk, constantly looking over your shoulder, terrified that if the landowner inspects your crop and finds it lacking, he will evict you and leave you destitute. Every weed is a threat to your security.
But under the new covenant, you are the son or daughter of the landowner. You still go out and work the fields. You still strive to grow a good crop, but the terror is gone. You work with joy and freedom, knowing that the farm is your permanent inheritance. Your status in the family is never at risk.
Or, to look at it from a perspective of healing, you are no longer a desperately sick, dying patient who has just been handed a clipboard full of impossible health rules and told, follow these perfectly or you will die. You are a patient who has already been completely, miraculously healed by the great physician. The disease of sin has been cured. Now, you are joyfully participating in your own recovery and rehabilitation. You follow the great physician's instructions not to become cured, but because you are cured. You are simply living out the vibrant health that has already been freely given to you.
It is the ultimate difference between dead works fueled by fear and living faith fueled by love.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. spanning from the creation of the cosmos to the ancient sands of the Near East, from the blood of the sacrifices to the empty tomb of Jesus. We've seen the orphan adopted by the King, and we've explored the staggering, heart-transforming promises of the New Covenant. I want to sincerely thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It is a genuine honor to share this time with you, unpacking these ancient, life-giving truths.
And we want to warmly encourage you as you continue in your walk with Christ. Whether you have been exploring these ideas for decades or whether today was the very first time you grasped the difference between a contract and a covenant, we want you to actively celebrate the immense joy and profound peace that comes from simply resting in His finished work. You do not have to exhaust yourself trying to climb a sheer glass mountain to reach God. He has already come down in the person of Jesus to carry you to the summit.
As you move forward from here, we want to leave you with a firm encouragement. Always anchor yourself to the pure Word of God, exactly as we've explored it today. Be incredibly guarded against voices or environments that try to drag you back into a contract mentality. Do not allow yourself to get weighed down by the religious traditions of men that insist you must add your own works to Christ's finished work. Do not let anyone put you back on that exhausting treadmill of performance or under a covenant of works. Christ has set you free by grace. Step into the light and live boldly in that freedom.
As we conclude our deep dive today, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your week. We read earlier that the New Covenant explicitly means the Creator of the universe has permanently deleted the record of your sins and sovereignly chooses to remember them no more. If that is objectively true, why do you spend so much time and emotional energy trying to reread a record that no longer exists? How would your life fundamentally change tomorrow morning if you actually allowed your past to be as completely forgotten as God has made it?